Awesome. It's official. We've begun. Welcome, everybody, to the Queer Voices reading series. We have a spring reading tonight. We're so excited that you're with us here this evening. Thank you to Claude Peck and our partner, Quatrefoil Library, for sponsoring the event this evening, and to Sherrie Fernandez-Williams for putting together this Zoom room so we can all be together. I know it's a beautiful night here in Minnesota, so it's awesome to be with everybody in a collective experience. And I hope you're enjoying a nice breeze. And if you're not joining us here on Dakota land, that wherever you're joining us from, you're finding some way to get grounded tonight as we all come together. Tonight, we have 4 incredibly talented readers, 3 of whom are here right now, and we're hoping our 4th will join as we proceed. But so far, we have Mair Allen, Jelani Johnson, and Katie Robinson reading tonight. And we are also very, very excited. Sherrie and I will be, yes, Trisha, sharing a few poems to get us started out this evening. Next year, Queer Voices will be celebrating their 30th anniversary, their 30th season. It's really excited, not to be confused with my 30th birthday, which has sailed past us. But we're very excited to kind of enjoy this 29th season. We're 29 again. Everybody gets to be 29 again and enjoy that energy this year. You may have seen we started a Queer Voices Minnesota Instagram. We're also on Twitter, and I'll drop that in the chat in a second. So you can try to stay in touch with us that way as we get started the heavy lifting of trying to stay engaged with folks in a social way, in a social moment. And we just wanted to start with a note of profound gratitude to our founding curators, Andrea Jenkins and John Medeiros, who partnered with Carolyn Holbrook and the founder of SASE, The Right Place, to birth Queer Voices reading series some 29 years ago. And they're only 29 years old too. Everybody gets to be 29. So that is our welcome message for the moment. I'm going to pass it off to Sherrie, who will continue with the welcoming energy.
All right. Thanks, everyone, for being here. Yep, I'm Sherrie Fernandez-Williams, and I thank Lisa Marie Brimmer for just being an all-around amazing human and keeping Queer Voices alive and inviting me to join them for this fun ride. And so Queer Voices does continue to be a reading series, but we're also building ways to promote and nurture the queer lit community. So looking for other ways to do that. So beginning in the fall, we look forward to establishing some writing workshops in collaboration with Hennepin County Libraries and Quatrefoil Library. And we will be returning to hosting those Saturday morning writing circles over Zoom, where queer writers can carve out time to accomplish writing. And that's been like really effective for getting work done. Queer Voices electronic chat book will be released during Pride Month. So please look for communications from us about that. We're excited to share the beautiful work from the writers that we've been in community with. And we hope that there's other folks who might be interested in joining us and being part of this community. All right, Lisa.
Yes, tonight's reading, probably around an hour. We have 3 to 4 readers, and Sherrie and I are going to both share some poems to get us started off. This is a habit that John and Andrea started. When they held the series, they would often read their own work, but since we've been in community sharing and learning about and listening to queer writers of the past and the present, we thought we'd open the space tonight with a reading from other queer writers within the canon. And so tonight I'll be reading A Litany for Survival by Audre Lorde. I feel like there's so much that one could say about this poet, and I will suffice it to say that we can all use her medicine right now in so many different ways. And this poem, especially in these late days of Supreme Court rulings, of anti-protest legislation, of all of the things and trends and ways and means, our survival is being limited and so forth. We can all use this litany. A Litany for Survival by Audre Lorde. For those of us who live at the shoreline, standing upon the constant edges of decision, crucial and alone. For those of us who cannot indulge the passing dreams of choice, who love in doorways, coming and going, in the hours between dawns, looking inward and outward, at once before and after, seeking a now that can breed futures, like bread in our children's mouths, so their dream will not reflect the death of ours. For those of us who were imprinted with fear, like a faint line in the center of our foreheads, learning to be afraid with our mother's milk. For by this weapon, this illusion of some safety to be found, the heavy-footed hoped to silence us. For all of us, this instant and this triumph, we were never meant to survive. And when the sun rises, we are afraid it might not return. When the sun sets, we are afraid it might not rise in the morning. When our stomachs are full, we are afraid of indigestion. When our stomachs are empty, we are afraid we may never eat again. When we are loved, we are afraid we will vanish, excuse me. When we are alone, we are afraid love will never return. And when we speak, we are afraid our words will not be heard nor welcomed. But when we are silent, we are still afraid. So it is better to speak, remembering we were never meant to survive.
Thank you so much, Lisa. We were never meant to survive, yet here we are. Okay, I have something short and sweet from June Jordan, and the collected works of June Jordan has been the gift that keeps on giving to my queer Black soul. And in one poem, she describes her purpose in writing poetry in particular, and it's called These Poems. These poems, they are things that I do in the dark, reaching for you, whoever you are. Are you ready? These words, they are stones in the water running away. These skeletal lines, they are desperate arms for my longing and love. I am a stranger, learning to worship the strangers around me, whoever you are, whoever I may become. Okay, June Jordan. And so June Jordan asked if you are ready. So are we ready? Are we ready to receive the gift our readers are bringing with us tonight? All right, okay. So our first reader this evening is Mair Allen. Mair Allen is a writer living in East Phillips. Their work has been in Hooligan Mag and other places on the internet. In 2020, they won the Microcosmos Poetry Prize and placed second in the 2021 Penrose Poetry Prize. They're an MFA candidate at Antioch University, and when not writing, they can be found. Right, Mair? Okay, let's turn it over to Mair Allen.
Thank you for landing the joke. And thank you for those poems to start us out with. It's I feel like it's hard to follow, but it's also hard to precede the other great readers. So I'm happy to be here in the middle. and I will read a few poems. I have them on paper, so I'll be looking down and not making eye contact on the screen, which is sometimes, I kind of want to do this, but that's worse. So the first poem is on starlings at the Bell Natural History Museum. The first thing visible when we walk into the exhibit is a projection of starlings over a field. A curved white wall is a screen, a portal into the image, as well as a curtain, blocking the rest of the room from view. The birds flow in a wavering density. The sky behind them, a flat gray, obscured or revealed by their mass. Here let mass mean church as much as matter. Here I am already layering meaning onto what are not even birds, but a digital memory of flight. Beautiful is not generally what I want to describe something as, but resonant will maybe work. A resonance stills me. The individuals become a collective shape, a temporary vessel, something that dances in response to a threat, and the dance saves them. This wall that is not a group of starlings is a projection of how we could be. And this one is called Four Horses. In college, I once rode something, dappled and silk. The university boarded horses in this small, small town. Unbelievable. To a classmate that I had never saddled, roped, or reined, she walked me out into a cornfield. The bridle an unfamiliar weight in my palm, legs straining to mold against velvet, barreled ribcage. Sitting in the defunct home ec room, the troupe drew what we wished we could do. Long-legged, lopsided creatures graced the girls' pages. Suspended above asparagus grass, quarter lemon suns wedged in corners. The myth of a blank page, too much potential for me. Wooden and hollow, I came as a horse to the woman I love, banging on the gates, pretending to be a gift. I carried war in my belly, a history of men, desire like a siege. I camped for years, waiting. I dreamt her trapped once, knowing that starved in a mountain pass, she would set the horses loose and eat all the people. This is in response to a Jericho Brown tweet. Well, the clouds slowly lower themselves onto the beach. The waves lap, indifferent. He asks, do lesbians fake it, even with each other? As if we are not human, less layered, or apt to light 2 cigarettes after a long night, or pray for a messenger bird to slash open the sky. I laugh, as if women don't practice lying to each other before we lie on top of each other. As if I wasn't the first woman I pretended to love. My fingers slide into the still warm sand, brush the rough edge of a cracked shell, frayed cotton filter, green future sea glass of an old Heineken bottle. Sometimes I fake it with myself. By it, I mean I close my eyes and imagine hot clouds seeping inside of me. By it, I mean existing. I, a slow erasure at the edge of the frame, wavering mirage of city skyline, empty beach. I'm afraid I've never not faked it. Some women are overexposed photographs, time-lapsed. Some women are not women at all, but scratches on the film you look through to make sense of the image. You wish, my words tilt towards the last desperate line of sun. Okay, 3 minutes. I'm gonna do one more. Let's keep up with the birds, right? We just are doing bird poems and poems in Minnesota. So, restoration in the bird sanctuary. The sun dives singing, sharp and yellow-breasted, to land on the dark slash of a leafless branch. Does a goldfinch mean something? There are signs, although none are present now, that say workers are restoring the overgrowth back to savanna. The land is only made to look wild. The field smudges ochre against sky that pours blue paint down the throat of the eye. I would like a goldfinch to mean something. Trunks, stalks, seeds flash through binocular lenses, but I can't catch the bird. My love takes my head in her hand, guides my eyes. Can you see it? Half the field is flattened. Heavy grass heads twine to the ground, bowed for the workers to light the tassel. A controlled burn will remove everything considered overgrown to make room for new growth. The way she trims my hair to show me she loves me, even as she loves another. We two somewhere between reap and thresh. I close my eyes, and when they open again, everything shimmers the same. She and I are not thin calipered oaks or dry grass, but we have known our own bending, bowing, burning. Heat rises from the ground, and from the curved horizon, red-winged blackbirds call, punctuate the silence into sentences, the wind into a new syntax. Walking back to the car, she wonders, why is a place like this full of birds, not full of their bones? I imagine myself in the golden grass, too heavy in death to gather whole. To move me, she'll have to break me. I think that's time, and I want everyone to have as much time as possible and hopefully have a little time to talk after. So thank you very much for being here too. It's so beautiful out, and it's so great to have everyone here together.
That was so beautiful, Mair. Make some noise for Mair in the chat. Make some noise for Mair with your emojis. Just make some noise for Mair. You can unmute and make some noise. That was a beautiful reading. And yes, take it in. Take it in with your camera on, please.
So good.
Beautiful reading. Thank you for those poems. Mimi's ready to read those poems in the sunshine, so we better see a book sometime soon. We're ready for the book that you're building. These are beautiful, beautiful, beautiful poems. Thank you so much, Mair Allen. Our next reader, see, Emily, I'm ready for the book. Our next reader tonight is Jelani Johnson. Jelani Johnson is an educator, writer, poet, and documentarian. He is pursuing a certificate in documentary studies and is interested in social issues related to Black and queer identity development, African American history, and education policy. He currently works at Amherst College in the areas of student leadership and development. And he joins us tonight, and we are all excited. Make some noise, folks, while Jelani comes on stage. Let's just lean into the full imagination of the moment.
Thank you so much for that introduction and for the applauses. I am so happy to be here, and I'm so gracious to have been invited. I'm so excited that I can get to share a little bit about myself through my poetry. Can everyone hear me well? I just want to make sure that the sound is well. I have a lot going on in my back of my neck of my wood, so I apologize, but if you can hear me well, please put thumbs up so I can make sure. Okay, good. All right, so I am also going to do a little bit of a stopwatch so I don't go over. All right, my first poem, I'm going to do a series of poems, is titled Exposed. I was afraid too much of me, was afraid I'd be unpalatable. Black and queer, two flags draped outside the doorstep to my home, the unaccounted heretofore space huddled in the cubby corner of my conscience. Refugee, they call me. Renegade forbade me. Instead, I drowned in black and blue, exposed. All right. My second piece, titled All These Things. Moments of internal chaos, a dozen dreams about where yesterday would take us, tossing and turning nights, transferring schools that might make a better future. Tic-tac-toe and chess are the best, reading Mein Kampf on the train while onlookers seem to rack their brains, kissing a dozen nights, my mother's forehead and revealing every little lie, my way of keeping trust. Until trust was none to keep, left tears in my eyes at the devastation of knowing that I could not measure, guilty pleasures, sneaking snacks from the kitchen into the bedroom, bike rides to get away from home. Home ever elusive, an elusive thing it seemed. Uniformed weekdays as teens, but dress down Fridays were my days. Uneasy crushes with boys, rejection of the savior, formerly known as Jesus, tucking my head under covers of shame. They teach us nights of wondering who I am, taught I'd reap what I sow as I look out at nights, thought through the broken windows. Hatshepsut, Nefertari, Tubman, Chisholm, all my sheroes, though there were never any Quiros. Pride in my mother who nurtured me, cared for and sacrificed all that she needed. Underneath a fear was pain. Stories of marches led by Marxists, Black power people and lovers of peace, all the same to me. Pride is of Blackness and Afrocentricity, confused on which piece of the puzzle I was to thee, while brokenness was all that seemed to follow me. I am from all these things. Actually, I'm not necessarily crying, although there's nothing wrong with crying. I actually irritated in my eyes. But these are poems to cry for sure. Shatter not, shatter not. I cannot run from the skin I'm in. It won't allow these 206 bones to disassociate. The limbs stay on, my heart beats strong and blood circulating. I'm contemplating just what you want from me. I cannot run from this space with just 2 eyes to see out of. I cannot deliver, return to sender the efforts you've made clear in my dismantling. And for what? For you to place upon my shoulders the impossible? My bones deserve, but the nerve of me more, as if it ever mattered. Preserving this skin, each bone, unbossed, shattered not, nor tossed by your entreaties, but rather embraced fully. All right, my next piece is titled From Stay to Go. I'm a treasure trove of yes and no, a bundle of joy and paint from head to toe. Please see me in the complexity of my identity rather than the wishes and twitches of yes and no. My yesterday is as unknown to me as tomorrow, and let that be a richly spent thing as this moment was. 5 seconds to and 5 seconds fro, I am today, from stay to go. And my next piece is titled Squirmish. You are swirling in my mind, vivid parts of motion, becoming one with spirit, a sport of ghosts who haunt my days as well. My nights of you, a melody of confusion, music of danger, forcing me to relive fantasies that mean nothing, that only come close to reality at the sight of your presentations, which delight my fancy, squirmish presentation overcoming me as I delight in false plays of disinterest. Pork chop dish, no more am I unusable. And perhaps religion commands it, no less than sin, unable to buy your affections with smiles, thin veneers of clockwork, panting, hiccups, blinking, heartbeats, ticking, trembles, tears. All right. Our next piece is titled Confession. I confess I didn't know how much this meant to you. The articles of my confession are mere parts of introspection, my reflection, reflecting on just what we meant to one another. And I was making a piece of you in my fabric to wear with me and brag about, to paint upon the canvas of future possibilities without a drought of thought, without a moment to mar it, sent it away to spare the flare of it. But had it always come back to me, this piece of you, except this time you took it back along with time, an elusive thing, a thing I never seemed to get back in days past, but you can keep it because I don't use it anymore to measure on anything worth anything to me, but you do. So tell me, are you happier now? 24 white carnations left here, the funeral of my moments spent wondering. It's the moments of presence, you see, presence I spent gift wrapping in thoughts of you. And you forever chasing time, never appreciated the presence that my presence gave you. This is my confession. All right, I think I have time for one last one. Didn't think I'd have enough time, but looks like I do. Okay. One moment, sorry everyone. Okay. The moment your presence meets mine, your lips tantalize me, angelic smile and aura greets me when we meet. Forgetting all people and things, the moment your presence meets mine. Our eyes dance passionately, looking at one another in a way rapidly, evading an intensity, which arises from a spiritual awakening that avails itself until I remind myself where we are. Drowning the hopes of our union while sparing the contents of our lives, relegated to self-perpetuated cycles of lonesome banality, along with formalities and appearances without which our roles would be redefined, and in so doing, surrendering the idea of you, the idea of us. I keep the thought of you inside my mind, the feelings I have for you inside my heart, the words you symbolize far from my lips away from your lips, my karmic spirit, yearning, captive, starved. Thank you all. I super appreciate this opportunity, and I'm
Thank you,
gracious.
Jelani. Can we make some audible noise for Jelani Johnson, please?
Yes.
Yeah. Great job.
Oh man, I enjoyed that
Wonderful,
ride.
Jelani.
Thank you.
Enjoyed that
Beautiful.
ride, Jelani. Thank you. And we recently learned that we are NYC brother and sister as well. So
Yes, representing
representing, brother.
Brooklyn. Woo-woo.
All right. Thank you, Jelani. All right. Our next reader for this evening is Katie Robinson. Katie Robinson is a student of love, trauma, and transformation. Their academic, artistic, and community work is curious about and present with individual and collective harm, such that our wounds may be understood outside of the modernist colonial paradigm. As an abolitionist, they are a servant to transformation that occurs at the levels of the psyche, the nervous system, and the close relationship. Katie's academic work as a PhD candidate studying depth psychology with a specialization in community psychology, liberation psychology, eco-psychology, and indigenous psychologies has offered them rigorous exposure to the harms of Western conceptions of mental health, as well as in turn the decolonial view of the psyche. Katie lives in Minneapolis with their partner, cat, and dog. Let's give it up for Katie Robinson. Welcome to the stage, Katie.
Thank you. Thank you for reading my very wordy bio. So appreciate that. And just like, wow, to the poets who came before me, I'm just reminded so much about how much I love poetry. Like y'all, yeah. I'm reading an essay tonight. I typically don't write essays. So I'm just like savoring the crispness of what we just heard and trying to release into what I feel is not as crisp, given that it's creative nonfiction. So I'm going to be reading the first section of an essay called Here's How I Let Them Come Close. It's going to be published in an upcoming anthology called
a darker wilderness that's being published with Milkweed. So super, super exciting. And yeah, I guess that's it. I'm gonna get into it. So here's how I let them come close. I practice fear with bugs, specifically wasps. I sit on my cracked concrete stoop on humid Minneapolis summer mornings and notice the behavior patterns of bees and wasps, their early, dewy waking hours when I can see them cleaning their delicate legs. I liken their meticulousness to my cat's, chomping down on his paw to clean between each toe bean. As the sun rises higher into the sky, the bees and wasps take flight. They begin investigating the daylilies and dandelions, yellows and oranges punching out of greens to get the bees to come closer. They might buzz briefly by me as they go on their merry way, but even with a quick flyby, I always do what my therapist told me. I notice what happens in me. I watch the fear rise in my body as I remember every time I've been stung. Age 3 on the cheek, 11 on the thigh, 20 on the hand. How it felt, how long each sting took to heal. And then the bug is gone, on to brighter, sweeter things. By the time the dew has burned off and I am eating lunch, and by the time June has browned into August, they are decidedly more interested in me and what is on my plate. I assume it is because their food is waning, as their flight in and out of drying blooms has become frantic. They take risks in their desperation, circling in on my brightest clothes, my coffee, my egg sandwich. Here again, the fear rises, the memories of being stung flood my body, and I consider going inside. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I take off down the block, furiously waving and swatting my hands, cursing. But sometimes I don't, and I section off enough space in my body for the fear to see that there are other sections containing other emotions, and I shift my attention there. A place for curiosity, a place for relationality and familiarity. I wonder what it must be like to encounter a giant being. I wonder what they sense on my breath and in my energetic field. I wonder if they like the heat coming off my head. I wonder what drew them in, and I can't help but think they are coming close because they want to. I can assign them the same decision-making power I have, or I can think about their movements as pure reflex, but neither actually explains why the interaction is happening. All I know is that it is happening, an interspecies encounter where risk is present. And in my most solid parts, I sense there is a structure outside the spectrum between United States style individualized bootstraps choice and our fate is written in stone. Neither free market free will, nor an all-powerful God playing with dolls. A structure that governs what happens, that governs encounters. I sense a structure that is rhizomatic, a locus of power that has no center, that may burst forth anywhere, that is not solid or still. It is neither inside nor outside my body, not the wasp's or my own. I wonder, which is to say I sense this too, if our shared agency arises in our relationship to each other, in the dance of fear and relation that dwells in the interstices and edges, a dance perhaps known by all evolving, adapting creatures, perhaps even older than Earth. There is something not fully wasp, as I know wasps to be, and not fully me, as I know me to be, that governs us. We are entangled and in the midst of a vast network of resonances, a cosmically curated chaos in which sting or no sting, death or no death, everything is unfolding just as it should. I practice fear with bugs because I'm often scared, often at night. Sitting on the couch with my partner, my cat, and my dog, I can fall asleep with ease, drifting off halfway through whatever we are watching. But the moment I set the intention, it's time to go to bed, and I make my way to the bathroom, my physiology changes. My heart starts racing, and I begin to see shadows of figures in my mind's eye, standing in corners, breathing behind doors, suddenly reflected in mirrors. The moment I close my eyes to attempt sleep, they move in closer, standing over me, peering down. And so there is a nightly flicker of descending into rest, shooting back up and checking behind doors and in corners, and then trying to settle again. Going to bed is a ritual surrender to certain death, or worse, immobilization in the presence of an unknown other. As a poet, as a writer and artist, I've always known there is nothing fake about what I imagine. I have always known the mind's eye, the imagination, the psyche, as simply another plane of existence, no less real than the material, just alternate, another source of information, a door that can open to any place I need to be. This belief saved me many times as a young person, knowing consciously and unconsciously that I could always be caught and held by my enchantment. I could be whisked away by what interested me. My knowledge of and relationship with the immaterial and the unprovable was as much proclivity as survival skill. To this day, I'm bored by debates over the binary of what's real and not real, as if there is one objective reality out there for us to find and prove, a deeply colonial notion, and much more interested in what ensues as a result of X, Y, or Z reality. I am much more enchanted by a world in which the wasps and I are in a dance neither of us truly understand, but are both alive and conscious as a result of, than I am by a predetermined, measurable, fixed, and predictable existence. If someone tells me the wind is what animates the trees to sway and hush, I know I have learned nothing about why. When people explain away cosmic coincidences with rationality, like you keep pulling that tarot card because you haven't properly shuffled the deck and the cards are sticky, I'm left with, but why that card though? There is no reason to me not to include bad shuffling and sticky cards as a part of the cosmic design through which I was delivered the 10 of Swords every time I pulled for a year before I quit my job. And yet, seeking the depths and believing in the existence of all I imagine is itself a double-edged sword, a door left open. A door left open for some is an invitation inside, especially for tiny winged creatures looking for warmth. The central nightmare is this, and it stung me when I was tiny. I'm in bed and my best friend is in the bed. Figure in the corner of the room. I ask my best friend what she is doing up, but the figure says nothing. I hear it breathe. I look to the other bed and it is freshly made, untouched. She was never there. The figure walks closer, reaches out a long, spindly finger, and touches me between my eyes. Suddenly I can't move or breathe. And I wake knowing somehow this was no nightmare and the creature was not of Earth. For years, I went to sleep in my own bed and woke up in my parents' bed or on their floor, clueless as to how I got there. My family tells me I used to walk around the whole house in my sleep, having entire conversations with people, once even taking a shower without waking up. My sister, with whom I shared the top floor of our house, tells me the nights I attempted my own bed, she often had me just enough to fear anything alien related for the rest of my life, and just enough to be perfect ammo for older siblings and cousins and parents to poke me with. This fear of aliens, my ability to withstand it, indeed, my ability to separate the imagined from the real, and to proceed to dismiss the imagined entirely, or at least place it in a neat and tidy box far away from bedtime, this ability not to be afraid became a test. I practice fear with bugs because they are just as real as my nightmare, just as much an encounter, and I'm trying to work my way up. Of fear can get while maintaining the entanglement that governs us both, us all, me, the ET, my imagination, and the wasps. So that's it, y'all. Thanks for listening. That is the first section. If you want to keep reading it, A Darker Wilderness, it's coming out.
Yes, make some noise, make some noise.
Yes.
Yes. That was a beautiful journey. And I love that being enamored with nature is something that kind of held us today, like a sandwich. I'm always hungry, so I like a food reference, but like a sandwich or a hug, it felt very intimate to be held in that way. So thank you very much, readers. Thank you very much, Katie, for that reading. Unfortunately, unless Chris Stark is in the room, but with a different name for their video, which I'll give just a second. If you are here, Chris Stark, please put your hand up. Or no, okay. Chris Stark was unable to join us tonight. And so I am actually gonna drop, I'm gonna do the honor here of dropping in the chat after folks are done praising Katie, which they are still praising Katie because it was such a beautiful reading. Thank you so much. And your voice is, I mean, I know that I'm your partner, so I obviously hear you speak a lot, but to hear you read is such a treat. Chris Stark is a really wonderful author. I'm gonna read her bio. And I'm also going to share with you all just some links of hers because I really want you to get to know this writer. She's too terrific. And I heard her speak at the Women's Press Changemakers Alliance reading situation. I don't know, I'll put the link in the chat so that you can go ahead and follow to that very reading that she did. But she is an Anishinaabe and Cherokee lesbian writer, organizer, and researcher. Her novel, Carnival Lights, is a Minnesota Book Award finalist. Her first novel, Nichols, A Tale of Dissociation, was a Lambda Literary finalist. She teaches at Central Lakes College, and she is a true treasure for us to have here on this land. The links that I'll put in the chat are both a longer bio that I think can be really helpful to get to know her work, her website, and of course, the Minnesota Women's Press Changemaker Alliance video, as well as a few articles that she's written for that. She does so much amazing work to really presence Native communities around what we call our state, around this land, but also in different government areas. And so just like, if you have the moment, the time capacity, just click on those links, have them open for yourself so you can take a look at them at another time. If now is not the moment. I want to invite us to just take a second, take a deep breath. We just ingested so much beautiful work. And one other habit that we want to keep going with Queer Voices readings is to have a Q&A. So Sherrie, Mair, Jelani, Katie, you can turn your cameras back on. We kind of want to bring everyone back up on stage. You can take a few breaths together, take a drink of water, stretch out. For folks that are joining us, yeah, feel like you can move your shoulders a little bit. We'll have a little bit to exchange some words, and then at the actual end of the call, we can allow folks to kind of put cameras back on so there can be some fellowship here. But I just wanted to give folks a little bit of an idea of what we'll be looking at here. I have a first question. I'm gonna wait for Mair to come back here though. But I do have
for some reason can't figure out how to turn my video on, as if I haven't been in 100 Zoom calls. Great.
Oh, I think that's happening. Is anyone else having Zoomnesia? I think it's the equivalent of when you go to the kitchen and you're like, but why? Why am I in the kitchen? We don't know. We don't always remember. So no worries, Mair. Michael, I mean, we were in a lot of different places throughout this reading. You know, we were in the forest, and we were in these intimate relationship moments, and we were thinking about deep interiority, but then we were also then thinking about childhood bedrooms. And so there was such a sort of collection of images that has been brought to us over these last, 45 minutes. I'm curious for each of you readers, if you could share a little bit about what inspires you to write. And you can say, like, what inspires me to write generally, or of course, what inspired some of the work that you read tonight. I think it's always exciting to hear about the inspiration journey, because us writers never can get enough. So I don't have an order. You're welcome to pop in where you fit in. If you have an answer right away, please share. What inspires you as a writer now, or is that changing?
I can start actually. So first off, thank you for inviting me to this space and for everyone being in attendance. This is a beautiful, lovely room. I'm mostly seeing cameras off, but it's still beautiful to see so many boxes of people here. So I appreciate you all. And I'm looking forward to us all being able to visually see each other. I think I guess I'll talk kind of more historically. My writing has primarily been a lot of reflective writing, poetry, reflective thought pieces. I've done some political reflection, socio-political pieces that kind of intersect my personal experiences and my identities, but also with maybe the work that I do, which is in education, or in areas of like, just like what's going on in current pop culture or political culture, political, issues that are going on in the world. I would say right now, because a lot of the writing that I want to do is more heart-centered and personal, there's the motivation really is around going deeper and being more vulnerable and exploring. So, part of it has been like thinking about my writing as a writer. How can I expand my writing? Of course, how can I incorporate different types of writing styles? But I think for me, it's not just writing about the things, because honestly, like most of the poems that I wrote, I probably would not have read like 5 years ago, or even maybe a few years ago, unless you were like a friend, like we were really, really comfortable. I was like, oh, I want to read this. But honestly, like most of the pieces that I shared today are shared because of where I'm at. So I think a part of that is that's a huge part of what's driving that. A part of it is also modeling, particularly as a guy, as a man, a queer man, but also as a queer Black man. What does vulnerability look like, or might look like, right? Because we know it looks different for different people, but what might it look like, and what are ways that we can reimagine masculinity, identity, sexuality, etc., gender expression, right? And so the more I do that work, the more I go, you've got some more work to do. You've got some more vulnerability to go deeper in, and in order to really fully manifest not just the life you want to live, but the kind of stories you want to tell, the kind of stories as a writer, as a documentary, person doing documentary work. How are you going to expect this from the people that you're talking to and you're engaging with if you're not doing this? So it's actually been a huge part of how that's also reinforced my own development and my own writing.
I love that, Jelani, and I feel like I can pick up around, oh, it's telling me I'm unstable. Can y'all hear me? Okay. Yeah, it's kind of like, what story do you want to tell? I feel like writing gives me a way to interpret and reinterpret the stories that I have, and just try to make sense and remake sense of like the things that I've experienced or gone through. It's a place to kind of, I guess, like reinvent myself. I don't know if that's super navel gazy, but I just feel like, but also, like reinvent the world, and how, and just what's going on. I feel like it's a way for me to write the reality I prefer, whatever that is. And so it feels kind of like yielding magic, how I want to. And I mean, that's kind of what I feel like storytelling is, or it can be. So hell yeah.
I think, yeah, both of those answers resonate. I'm trying to remember, I read an essay recently. I can't remember who wrote it. And if I do, I'll put it in the chat. But they said that within the space of the essay, they're allowed to be more brave than they find themselves in real life. And I think for me, when I came to writing, I really was looking for answers. And now I think that, or like to make sense of things in a way. And I think that now it's a space where I am learning to be comfortable not having answers, and to allow an openness and almost like a quality of noticing in my life. So I feel like it's almost become like intertwined with my process of living, and is more about how I move through the world and what intention looks like and what noticing looks like, and how to be like confident enough that to share that with people, and that could connect.
I'll just add too, like thinking about connecting and thinking about like legacy, right? Like I also feel like I feel like there's something for me in my writing practice that is like how I know how to be queer. It's like the only way I know how to be like in a legacy is writing. I don't know. I feel there's a way in which it's like the only language I can speak or the only action I can do that like connects me to a legacy of queerness in a way. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it felt true.
Oh, all those answers are so beautiful. I'm glad we're recording so that we can revisit this when we're feeling maybe lonely and we need to hear these considerations from other writers that are thinking and struggling. I have other questions, but I want to offer Sherrie a chance to ask a question. If you have questions, you can also put them in the chat. We can see what we have time for. I think we maybe have time for about 2, but how are you feeling, Sherrie? You were just witnessing or?
I can wait. I'm curious now to hear what your question is.
Oh, okay. Well, I'm gonna make it a 2-part question, but I noticed that like we have like there's just such a benefit of having multi-genre artists on the call, right? And so all of you really dabble in different work, and that's just so exciting to know like other, writers, like they're writing, they're making videos, they're making visual art, they're doing essays, like and like really considering the craft elements and the process elements of making this different kind of work. Um, and Mair, you kind of spoke a little bit to that about the bravery of what like an essay can give you. And I get curious a little bit about like how does that being that multi-genre artist inform your process? If you have a little point to give us about that. And that's kind of a compound question because I refuse to only ask you once, but this is my still last question, which is like, and who do you look to? Is there a queer author or any author really that you want to hold up, or and they don't have to write works of books, but they can maybe author films or something that's really kind of giving you life, or that you'd like to share? That one's optional, but the real question is, how is that life of managing being a multi-genre artist? How does that impact your work? What can you share with us about that? Jelani is not going first, apparently. Jelani, turn off the camera.
I'm trying to think. I made music for a long time. I wrote for a long time. And I think that maybe this speaks to what Katie was saying about queerness or identity, or I think that they're just spaces where you can allow yourself to play in a different way. I think that there are spaces where you get to realize how many different people you are. I think that there are so Fanny Howe is a poet whose poetry I don't love, but whose essays I love, and I love the way that she talks about being a poet and like moving through the world in constant bewilderment. And I think that there's no reason to limit oneself in that way. I think you can be bewildered in many genres, in many mediums. And I think that those are 2 of the big things for me. I don't think I could write if I didn't have like a sense of play with it or a sense of play in other spaces.
I I could not agree more. I feel very much like I'm an artist because like almost by like happy accident, or like that was never the point, but it was just this like feeling of bewilderment or of like wonder. And then these certain, because I've done, you know, like theater stuff or visual art, poetry, I feel like it's kind of like, well, this is where you can X, Y, or Z. This is where you can play, or this is where you can experiment. And that was always just something that is who I am, because I write later in this essay, I'm like, I'm not a productive poet. Like I write like a couple poems a year, but I like the way that I view the world and move about is so, you know, like people are like, you're so deep, or you know, whatever. But it's like I don't feel, it's like a definitely a form of queerness. Like I feel weird in that way. Like it's, I'm like, yeah, not to y'all, obviously, but you know, it's like an alternative. It's like a form of queerness, I feel like. Yeah.
Yeah, and I wasn't getting off video to be to be avoiding actually, because I was trying to like preserve the you know quality, but yeah, no, I think for my answer would be that a lot of my writing is necessarily interdisciplinary, because I can't think about who I am and my identity or identities without seeing the interconnectedness of it. So for me, I'm always finding ways to connect whatever I do. And it's one of those things that can be like really great and also endlessly like overwhelming, because I'm always trying like, oh, but this connects in this way, that connects, and it's great, but it's like something's like, okay, no, like that was a stretch, but no, like I really still think all things relate and connect. And it's a part of, I think, my undying, I don't know, it's a little dramatic, but search for meaning that makes my work, whether it is in the field of education as a former teacher, and I do still facilitate and use teaching as kind of like the ground of whatever I do. And I always find a way to permeate everything that I do with education and teaching and engagement. And yet I find myself using other aspects of my creativity, whether it's humor, whether it's you know, whether it's the ideas of political or social thought that influence my you know my moral compass. I do feel that a lot of how my work is interdisciplinary is just the virtue, like by virtue of my ability to really stay grounded. And I think ironically enough, being grounded requires being constantly disrupted and ungrounded and challenged, and it's through it's through defying and challenging and getting messy and getting in, you know, getting kind of to the root of whatever that I do, that grounds me in why I still have this search for whatever it is that I'm searching for in terms of truth, in terms of vision, in terms of life. And that's what makes my writing reflect that. It's a roundabout way of saying that I really, really appreciate essentially being able to use whatever art to show my different passions and interests. And that also makes it more worthwhile, in my opinion.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. Sherrie, do you have last questions?
Thank you. Yeah, I love all of these answers. And so I heard you all talk about, you know, playing and exploration and then disrupting, like being grounded and then being disrupted. And I'm just wondering, you know, how do you come across those moments where you're writing and then, you know, you're kind of in the flow at this point, but then you come to a thought, and before you put it down, you second guess yourself. You're afraid of putting that thought down. And I'm just wondering, it doesn't necessarily have to be about, any of the pieces that you shared tonight, but I do wonder if there, the pieces that you shared, was there a line you came across, like before you wrote it down, you had to do a gut check, you were afraid to write it. What did that fear tell you? What were you afraid of? Yeah, I'm just curious to know if you're ever sure. Katie said, nope, never afraid. For real? Okay. Yeah, I'm just curious your thoughts around that. Writing through the fear.
I can start. I mean, I think like for me, this piece, yeah. So this is like my first creative nonfiction, my first like real go at creative nonfiction. Writing about content that is, I mean, yeah, it's like completely honest and real about like my deepest fears and how I can't sleep like ever. So yeah, like I, an essay is an attempt, and I was attempting this for like 2 years. I started, the idea before and during the uprising. So I think fear, the essay is about fear. There's fear around every corner. There was fear of like, what can I say? What can I, like, it's still a lot of fear wrapped up in it. But I think, on being on the other side of like, okay, like it's there now, and you learn that it's not so scary. Just straight up there, you learn that there are like rewards to that moment, and then like how brave you can be just writing down the thing, even if no one sees it. There's like an admitting to yourself. So I don't know if that answered your question exactly, but I think, I mean, especially nowadays, like I'm trying to approach where it's scary, and just to see like, okay, where can I, it's like each moment is just like an invitation. And I'll just say, like, over the past year or so, I read a couple memoirs. One of them is I'm Lying, But I'm Telling the Truth, by Basi Ikpi. And then Akweke Emezi's Dear Sentherin. And then also I read Untamed by Glennon Doyle, which I'm like embarrassed to have loved as much as I did, but like, hello, here we are. And so I think honesty in terms of like fear, and even just like, can I just be honest enough to say what I'm scared of? Like there's something there that, yeah, those are all really honest books, and have inspired me around fear and saying the scary thing. So I love that question.
That's cool. And that's a beautiful piece. And so for you, it's not like just a line, it is the entire essay. Right. Okay. Thank you. Others?
I was gonna just say, for me, it's a lot of my earlier writing, I did spend a lot of time censoring a lot of what I wrote. In fact, when I did write originally, a lot of my writing, I wrote public. I would just write it, and there was this idea that I was being bold by incorporating my writing publicly. I mean, in some ways I was, but in some ways I wasn't really being authentic, because I was doing things that I would polish, and I would edit, I would over edit, I would over analyze, and it wasn't really me. Some of it was great, but it was always like the acceptable version, right? It was whatever. I didn't do a lot of my deep writing until I stopped writing publicly, and I started to go, you're not being vulnerable with your writing, and therefore your writing isn't growing, it isn't developing, not at least the ways that I wanted it to. So it wasn't until I spent at least the last maybe 6 years not writing publicly. Every now and then I would post, but to go deeper. And it took me at least the first 3 or 4 years to go at least deep enough where I was like, no, that's now you're being authentic as a writer, and now you need to figure out, okay, what are the things I need to do internally to now pour out into my writing what is authentic to who I am, right? So there's evolution, right? Both in the writing process, but also in the personal development process that needs to happen before both of them can come together, I think, as a writer, for the full development of your writing and your personal development. So yeah, that was my process.
Yeah, cool. Terrific. Thank you, Jelani.
I am not brave. I do a lot of hiding in language. I have a lot of generous readers who will point to where I'm hiding. And what I've kind of developed is a metaphor of, like, the poem is a house that I built. I'll always put windows in, but sometimes the windows will be locked. Sometimes there'll be really heavy curtains over the windows. You can't see inside. And then what I ask for people is to tell me, like, did I put a door in though? Can you come in? So I'm good with windows. I can usually let people see inside, but I'm always looking for more doors to connect to people. I guess is the poetic, not real answer to that.
You had some brave lines in there. That one about do women fake it with each other? Anyway, some good lines, brave lines. Do we have time for a question or two from the folks here?
We have reached 20 minutes of Q&A, 25 nearly. So we're at a point where I want to check in with the readers. How are you all doing? And are there any questions? Yeah, everyone's good. Okay, good. It's like hard to tell. Friday Zoom stamina. You never know sometimes. That's good. Are there questions from the, sorry to hop in, Sherrie.
No, go ahead. That's good.
Are there questions from the audience? I hadn't seen any.
This has just been a really good, solid, very pleasant. It's mellow. It's like a good wine. Something that, it's fun. It's also makes you think. It makes me want to write. It makes me want to go through different aspects of things. That just each person has said something different that I have found insightful and just comforting. It's good for a spring evening that feels like summer anyway. Yes, Omid, inspired, good one.
Mimi, thank you, Carly Elaine, for sharing that. Mimi, did you want to share your question?
Oh, mine was just a comment, really. I think I put in the chat that as I was looking, just kind of thinking about the works, kind of collectively, I was seeing these themes of both like collectivity, versus individual and collective action, vulnerability, which you all just spoke about right now, but also what is reality and to whom, like coming through in all of the works. And I think of Katie's in particular there, and also queer futures. And I wish I could formulate an amazing question about those themes, but it does make me think about, okay, what do we think, what is on our minds as like queer people, and as some of us as queer people of color, and these just seem to be some of the themes that are coming forward. And it's just interesting for me to think about as like, collections that could come out of our Minnesota queer writers, so it's really just more of a comment, but if anybody wants to add on at all, you're certainly welcome.
I can jump in. I think for me, like when I, in terms of queer futures, and ultimately like this piece didn't get to do everything I wanted it to do, because ultimately I wanted to be writing about transformative justice. and writing about, I didn't like get to it in this piece, it was too small, but I think for me, when I think about queer futures, I do think about abolition, and I think about what, I mean, yeah, you know, what does it mean to be scared in the presence of another, not knowing what'll happen, and know that you're entangled and know that you're at risk. I mean, I really, you know, I want to get there starting where I started, but it's kind of like, it's going to take a lot to get there. But that's, you know, that's really present on my mind of like, how do we transform our relationships? How do we transform what we believe is danger? Is really, really central. Yeah, for me at least.
Thank you so much for that perspective. And I wanted to share a little about why I started with the poem Exposed, because it kind of speaks to this idea of future and but starting from a place of feeling disconnected in some way. And so just for the sake of me actually having context. So that poem was the first one, it was the shortest one, but it was one of the most, I think, elemental ones for me. Specifically, there's a piece, there's a part where I say, I was afraid too much of me, was afraid I'd be unpalatable, Black and queer, 2 flags draped outside the doorstep to my home, the unaccounted heretofore space. So I talk about my identities as being a space, but there's no feeling of home, right? So there's this idea that I'm trying to live into my truth, but I'm also not feeling like I have a space to have it. And I say heretofore space, huddled in the cubby corner of my conscience, refugee, they call me renegade, forbade me, instead I drowned in Black and blue exposed. So I'm talking about essentially that I always see myself as this idea of as a refugee. And I'm a refugee in both of these identities. I'm not just a refugee in my Blackness, but I'm also a refugee in my queerness. And I think the future for me, when I wrote this, really, I was talking about really what my entire process was for coming to terms with my identity with my family and not feeling the support that I wanted. But I was also talking about how my process was, I was exposed, because I talk about how like I didn't really own my coming out story. It was like taken from me because my family, I have a whole thing that I can't find because I don't know whatever happened to it, but I wrote this whole piece years ago where I talked about as a testimonial, and it literally I use it in the form of scenes. So it's like scene 1, this, scene 2, scene 3, scene 4, because acting, again, all things connect, right? I use theater, you know, acting in my poetry, and essentially what I talk about is how I didn't have my story to tell. My story wasn't mine to tell, it was taken from me. But at the end, I talk about how from this point on, it's my story to tell. So I still have agency. I'm taking the agency of my story and I'm making it mine, and I'm choosing a path forward. So for me, that's a really, you know, convoluted way of saying, like, for me, it's agency is the future. It's control from the center, from the spirit, from the energy source of us as you know, queer individuals, especially for queer POC who often don't have models, right, to talk about these things, to address these concerns, to share our fears. Because when we grew up, we were looking at models that often didn't look like us, right, if we had any to begin with. And you know, so I think for me, it's constantly having that conversation of reimagining, but encouraging young folks, you know, who are often the ones trailblazing really at this stage, even for, you know, even when I think about my age and generation, it's continuing to also learn from younger folks, but also allowing that, never giving up the space to continue that mentorship and support, right, for those of us who are older. Because I look up to elders in this space who are able to make space for me, right? And often we we don't realize that we're doing that, but we are creating that space. I think continuing to have that space, continue to have that conversation is really important.
I can touch briefly. I think something came up for me earlier when Katie was talking about legacies, because, right, as a white gay person, there are long legacies in poetry and they're not good, you know? And so I think that a lot of my work is it's more about recognizing those foundations in the craft, in the histories of the work, and interrogating how they keep coming up for other writers of like European heritage, and constantly kind of being aware of that too, and just realizing that that's never going to be a job that's done. And so how can I, as a writer, hold that this is my craft too still, and what can I do about that?
Yeah.
Mm.
Beautiful. I'm going to say some thank yous and then we can stop the recording, but we can keep the movement and the love flowing. I just want to say thank you to our readers, Mair Allen, Jelani Johnson, Katie Robinson. Thank you so much for sharing your work tonight. Thank you to Chris Stark, who couldn't be with us, but we hope is with us in spirit and doing well. We send them love and light. And I want to say thank you to the audience for coming today to make this evening so special. Thank you for joining us, even with this beautiful weather we're having in Minnesota. Ooh, it's gorgeous out today. And you made it here to this reading, and it's so special that you were here. Thank you to Quatrefoil Library for having us. And I'm going to stop the recording. Thank you all so much. You can all make some noise, some final applause. Woo. Yeah, I'm going to put it on gallery view. If you want to show your face, you can do that now.
Yes, some audible noise for our wonderful
noise.
readers, please.
Yeah, make some noise.
This is great.
Amazing
This is
stuff.
terrific.
Okay.